Hello, everyone. Usually this would be the part where someone says, "Welcome to Lorecrimes." And I guess it is still Welcome to Lorecrimes, so I
hmm
just completely ran in circles in my head. But we're doing something a bit different today, is what I was building up to. Instead of all of us getting together to do either a podcast discussing the beginner to expert lore of a faction, person, or era, or a quiz where one of us gives a quiz and then
And one of
Eli
us fails incredibly badly, and
yeah,
Eli wins.
yeah,
Yeah.
or Hal comes in with the dark horse victory.
hmm
We have something a bit different. Andy, would you like to? Do you want to explain what we got going on here?
Okay, so we currently do not know what we're going to call this, but I'm sure if I'm editing this, I'll just flash it obnoxiously in your eyes right now to show what the series is called. But essentially, the premise is I know literally nothing about Warhammer Fantasy. I'm a 40k man. I enjoy the 40k books and the games, but I know fantasy exists. I know there's something called Age of Sigmar, and people don't like it as much. And there's a guy called Carl Franz that everybody loves, and there are
Ooh.
these rat boys called Skavens, and there's some good games called Vermintide. But other than that, I know pretty much nothing about Warhammer Fantasy. So I thought, well, what about if I'm the person who's the ancillary for the audience who knows barely anything from the ground up, we could just go through the basics and talk about Warhammer Fantasy with someone who actually knows what they're talking about. And so here we have Colin, the master of Warhammer Fantasy lore on the channel, who can tell a dunce like me what goes on in the universe.
And today, because we'd like today this first little project episode to be as introductory as it can, we're just going to go through a map of the Warhammer Fantasy world and see what's in it. Also, I'll just pick a location. We'll go through not quite all of them because some of them are both unimportant and have about one sentence worth of lore to be talked about. But all the big boys are going to get their hit, including, of course, the Empire, the High Elves, the Dwarfs. I'm going to go through all the big lads.
hmm
Uh,
And before we get anywhere near into the actual map, I've got to just say the first thing I've noticed about it is it's basically just like you look at where it says Albion and the Empire. It's just Europe. It's literally just Europe.
yeah, that's what makes this a lot easier, even if you know nothing about Warhammer Fantasy, because if you have a map of the Earth pulled up, I
They're
can
pretty
say
similar.
go to go to this spot, go to the U.S., and you're
Yeah,
there.
go to South America and I go New World. There we are.
Yep, it's quite easy.
Yeah. Okay.
I do like the not Earth. I think there used to be old lore that all of the planets that the old ones made, because the old ones are involved in fantasy too, because of course they
Of
are.
course. Yeah.
They
Couldn't keep
used
away.
they used to make planets like this as a template, which theoretically means they also made Earth or based on Earth.
Okay.
But this is old lore I'm digging into that may or may not be canon, and also Warhammer Fantasy exploded, so nothing we'll see developed on ever again. But with that, Andy, is there anywhere you'd like to start us off? Uh,
I think my only point of reference is well, you're a big fan of the Empire.
mhm.
I live in a place that used to be called Albion or Albia. So maybe we start near the Sea of, is that the Sea of Chaos?
Sea of that is the Sea of Chaos right above Albion.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess if maybe we start there, we go down and then we go one either side and see wherever you, so yeah, wherever we go with the conversation, see what takes our fancy.
Oh, I think I like that idea. So we'll start at the very top. You see where it says Chaos Wasteland and Northern Wastes?
Yeah.
And for anyone wanting to know where that correlates to on Earth, the North Pole, it's pretty self-explanatory. That's the area of the Warhammer Fantasy world closest to the Eye of Terror in comparison, where chaos is bleeding into reality. The realm of chaos is bleeding into the Warhammer Fantasy world. And the
Where the
reason,
penguins live.
uh, there's
Is
actually a
it
meme
cold?
about that. Oh, it's very
Yeah?
cold.
It is cold. Okay.
It's nothing but ice and chaos corruption. So it's ice and things that make you go crazy whenever you look at it.
Hmm.
And the reason for that is those old ones again. They
Ugh.
actually are the reason, even more so than 40k, that everything looks the way it is. Because when they were around, the old ones basically either created every race, most of the races anyway, not the orcs, but like the elves, the dwarfs, they all created or uplifted them with a purpose to fight chaos, because they were getting ready to do that. It was explicit in fantasy. Chaos just kind of happened in 40k. In fantasy, like, nope, no, we know it's here. We got to get ready for it. The four chaos gods always existed. We got to get ready.
And the old ones, it's they're the nemesis rather than space clouds.
Yeah, there's to my knowledge, there's no Catan equivalent in Warhammer Fantasy.
Oh,
Bit of a shame, but it would be rather hard to have robots in a fantasy setting. Sometimes they do try it, but
like the dwarves in the Elder Scrolls with the Dwemer, where they just have like golden mechanical spiders and stuff. That could work, maybe.
that would have been sick. But that kind of thing wouldn't happen. I don't believe it ever really happened. In AOS, there might be something like that, but for now, none of that, tragically. But
Oh,
to get back to the old ones, while they were doing that, at the northern poles and southern poles of the planet were these gates they would use to ferry stuff to the planet. And then, when Chaos invaded, they saw these two magical portals just hanging around, and were like, well, that's as good a door as any for us. And then they broke in, and the northern and southern poles of the planet slowly become more and more corrupted by Chaos.
okay.
Just to talk about the northern and southern one, because they're pretty much the same thing, just equal sides of the planet. You see the southern waste, it's Antarctica, it's on an island. That chaos corruption isn't really spread, but off the northern wastes, every time chaos invades in the world, those wastes slowly get just a little bit bigger. Which is unfortunate for everyone.
So where I'm seeing it says Grand Cafe, is that because I'm seeing that's quite blank? Is that chaos controlled and it's kind of looming closer to that kingdom place? Is that
It
spreading
is
from there?
Not. That's because it's the reason it's like that is because most maps of the Warhammer Fantasy world, aside from a map of Total Warhammer, are older, and until within the past pretty much year and a half, Cathay had no lore. This whole area, the whole eastern section of the map, paragraphs. That was it. So, in this case, I can talk about Cathay now that they've actually given it lore, but it's not blank because it's corrupted. It's blank because Games Workshop decided we don't want to write for this part of the planet.
Oh, okay.
Although
Just add more onto the Empire because that's what we like.
pretty much the western half of the planet filled with lore. Eastern half could not care less. But that's pretty much the chaos waste. There's demons there. There's chaos corruption. Although you did bring up penguins, and I feel like I should mention a little small meme in fantasy.
Go on then. Go on.
Is that Archaon is afraid of penguins.
Oh,
Because the southern wastes, there's beastmen. There's beastmen pretty much everywhere on the planet. That's something I should also just point out. But in the southern wastes, there's a lot of beastmen. And usually beastmen in fantasy are chaos corrupted people or merged with animals. Chaos turns people into animal people, essentially. It's a faction of furries.
so Dum here. Who is Archaon?
Right. Pardon me,
Right.
I'm pulling back. So you know Abaddon.
Oh yeah, we all love Abby.
It's
Abaddon.
basically Warhammer Fantasy Abaddon.
Okay.
He has a title that I think is a little bit cooler, in my opinion, the Ever Chosen of Chaos. That's some right proper evil stuff.
Yeah.
But
Favored by the gods, quite literally.
indeed, he had to go through all sorts of trials to get the treasures of chaos. And then he tries to blow up the world, and it succeeds because fantasy wasn't making money.
Oh.
Big sad. But he is afraid of penguins. There's a line in the lore where he says that the beasts of the southern chaos waste are the true beastmen because they've never had proper human like integrations into them. Like there's no human that got corrupted and became a beastman. So the meme goes, he thinks they're the truest to chaos. Surely he's afraid of penguins because it's Antarctica down there. There's nothing.
I'm
down
just
there.
imagining Pingu with like the the 8-pointed star on his sword, just going noot noot and just raging across the wastes. Archaon's like, I fear no man, but that
That
thing,
thing.
it scares me.
He wants nothing to do with that place.
Or that terrifying sea otter episode of Pingu where he's just there and he's got the big. Is it sea otter? He's got like it's like a walrus or something. He just comes out the. It's terrifying. I'll put like a reference in the thing, and people in the comments go, "Yes, that was the most terrifying episode of Pingu." But yeah, aside from that, so that's the northern and southern wastes. It's like very cold. Chaos can't craft boats because they're stupid, and they hate penguins. Okay,
Well, you
cool.
say that. Going immediately down
Okay,
to Norsca. Now you said that earlier. It was like Norway, prety much.
yeah,
It's
Norse. Very
yeah.
on the nose. Games Workshop.
Yeah.
Nice work.
They even call them the Norse. Like it's not.
Oh, of course they
They're
do.
not subtle about it at all.
Mm.
But these are so it's not as chaos corrupted in Norsca. It's close, but it's the difference between being on the doorstep of hell and living in it.
Hmm.
So, but beyond even that, the southern portions are reasonably free of chaos taint, but you still live in the Arctic Circle, so they can't grow anything.
Right.
And so they can't grow anything. The demons are constantly knocking on their doorstep, as well as other chaos corrupted monsters, like the Beastmen again. So they pretty much have no choice but to turn to raiding. And
Hmm.
every now and then, they just sail on down to the Empire or Albion, or sometimes they get real brave and go to Ulthuan, though that doesn't work out for them pretty much ever for reasons I'll get into.
The big donut in the sea. I can
Yeah,
see that.
that's
Okay.
that's the only landmass that doesn't have an equivalent on Earth because
Yeah, I was thinking. I don't remember that.
we do not have a donut in the Atlantic. It'd be cool if we did, but we do not.
Donuts. Yeah. But so yeah, I'm already assuming that like the Empire. I mean, it's where Germany is more or less, so that explains all the Germanic stuff. And then Araby, like Arabic, haha, very good. I'm starting to get reference here.
Yeah,
Um,
and you can build an idea of what it's going to be like in there based on the names alone a lot of the time, or location. At least with the human settlements. When you get to places like Lustria, it's a bit harder to
Lustria.
guess beyond saying that's South
fun.
America, but there's not
Yeah.
much people presence there. But to really quickly jump back to Norsca, that's pretty much where the majority of chaos worshippers are, at least as far as the ones we see in lore. In the eastern steppes, to really quickly pan over, there's actually a lot of Mongol chaos invaders, at
okay.
least based on Mongolian culture, but we don't get as much lore on them versus the Norscans. That's
We don't in 40k either with the White Scars. They're my favorite legions.
Yeah.
Like, do we get any lore? No. Okay.
but we know they exist. That's pretty much what it is. There is a little bit more lore on them than relative to their setting than the White Scars. White Scars probably have more lore overall, but relative to their impact, I think the Kurgans, I believe it is, have a little bit more impact, a little bit more lore, but it's still not much. That whole area of the world is pretty much Chaos Mongols are there. There's also Goblin Mongols.
Okay.
Moving on. Thanks, Games Workshop. And but yeah, life's hard in Norsca. It's cold. It's cold and chaos corruption in some places. You can't grow food most of the year. Pretty much the only option they have is to invade the Empire. There was actually one person or one family I know in lore that went to Norsca to help the Norskins because they had the most hippie idea ever. It was if we show them that we care and can like grow food and crops and take care of them, they can turn away from the dark gods. Andy, how well do you think it goes when people try and turn away from chaos?
I mean, I have seen every season of Vikings, so I'm pretty sure it involves like making getting a sword, putting it in a furnace, making it super hot, and saying, "Hold this in your hands and go for a quick walk around the courtyard, and I'll believe you if you don't get burned." Like, oh, okay, pretty harsh,
It,
but still.
that didn't happen, but they did. The lovely imperial couple that tried to help anyone did give birth to two of the people that helped the end times. Three of the people,
Okay.
pardon me.
Oh
So,
dear.
trying to unchaos Norsca, not generally a good idea.
No.
Moving down a bit, we'll go to Albion because I can probably finish the
Yay!
lore there in about 30 seconds.
It's England.
It is.
Hello.
It is England, except populated by.
Bretonnians.
Thankfully, no. There's no
Oh,
Bretonnians
because
there.
that would make sense. I was like, that's pretty on the nose name for a faction. I was assuming they'd be from Albion because it's Bretonnian.
The name comes from there, but they're not super Brit. They're like Arthurian legend French mix in Bretonia, and I hate them. But before I get into
Uh,
them and get angry, let's cross Albion off the list. Albion is like the idea of druidic practices and like the
okay.
pre-Roman Britain, essentially. So they're actually some of the only people left on the planet that know anything about what the old ones wanted to do with fighting chaos, and they keep
Hmm.
track of these magical lines across the planet that meet in Albion, among other places,
Hmm.
and basically do what they can to keep chaos from letting the world fall apart, or just rampant magic blowing the world up. Because magic is just everywhere in the Warhammer world. They're called the winds of magic, and they just flow across
Hmm.
the planet. So Albion, the druids there are some of the people that help keep that in check.
Okay.
And Gotrek and Felix also went there and killed a giant that was about 200 feet tall.
Oh, of course they did. Why
And,
not?
and then Gotrek grappled off of the falling giant using his optic nerve to reach the ground safely.
So you're saying he just did a God of War, and he was just like, "I've played the PS4 remake." Is like, yeah, or rethink, yeah, no.
Pretty much. Anything they fight is going to be past tense very
Who would win
shortly.
in a fight, Kratos or Gotrek?
Ooh, that's a. I'd have to think on that one. I'm not entirely sure. It'd be
Put in the
one hell
comments
of
who
a
you think would
battle.
win. Lots of axes.
There'd be a lot of axes, and then anything within a 50-foot radius of wherever they're at is just dead. The crossfire.
Pulverized, yeah.
But that's pretty much the majority of Albion lore you need to know. It's another one of those places that Games Workshop is like, it's cool background setting, but you
Yeah.
don't get like an army or anything out of it.
Oh, it's a shame.
Moving down, it might be a bit hard to see in the map. So go to the Empire and then go up, but don't hit Norsca. Do you see that little Kislev? Yeah.
Yeah. Kislev. Oh, yeah. Because just for reference to the audience, I'm looking at a map and I've zoomed in, but it's very blurry when it gets to small text. So I just saw Kiev, chicken Kiev, maybe? Yeah. Kislev.
Yeah.
Okay.
Despite despite not have they used to have an army in very old Warhammer Fantasy, and I mean
Okay.
old. But then for a while
Old.
they pretty much had no presence and the tabletop, but they've always actually had a decent amount of lore. They're the
Hmm.
buffer zone between the Empire and Chaos. It's basically just take like Polish, Russian, Ukrainian cultural Slavic soup and throw it into Kislev, and that's what you get. They've got the winged hussars. Winter's their greatest ally. They love bears. It's just a mishmash of that area of Europe.
Lots of Scandinavian stuff, and like, yeah, we're just gonna have lots of Adidas. Is it Adidas squatting, drinking vodka, Adidas tracksuits, bears.
There's no tracksuits, but they do have bear
Oh,
cavalry and they do drink
oh,
vodka.
hold on, bear cavalry. That sounds excellent.
That's
Why isn't that in the tabletop anymore? That sounds brilliant.
probably because the world doesn't exist. But they are bringing it back with the old world, like the pre-modern fantasy setting, and
Okay.
Kislev will have bear cavalry.
Oh, okay, cool. Good.
They've,
Because that was a crime if they were just going to be like, we're not going to make any more bear models that you can ride and throw, I guess, javelins at people. That'd be cool.
yeah, they're finally rectifying this grievous issue.
Hmm.
As for what it's like there, the weather is like Russia in the winter, except it's always winter. Winter just gets worse when it's proper winter. Although living there for thousands of years, the Kislevites have gotten pretty good at dealing with it.
Yeah,
And
they've learned how to make scarves and stuff.
yeah, they've learned all that. Go inside, drink your vodka to keep warm. Please do not drink alcohol, kids, if you are in danger of frostbite.
Yeah,
Oh,
don't do it.
I should throw
It
that in there.
constricts the blood vessels. Don't do it. It won't
Yeah.
make you warmer.
Not a good idea. But as for what's in there, ice. But
Ice,
the
ice,
queen of Kislev is always an ice mage. So whenever an army invades, she just kind of waves her hands and then it freezes to death.
Oh.
Which is pretty much how the Empire hasn't fallen. Because every time Chaos invades under the helm of an Everchosen, because Archaon's not the first Everchosen, he's the last. Every time they do so, an Everchosen goes, yep, time to take another crack at the world. They have to go through Kislev. And on the one hand, they always get through Kislev. But on the other hand, whatever makes it through is never as big as the first army. So the only reason the Empire doesn't get butchered is because you can thank Kislev for that.
Because Kislev is the buffer zone to be
Yeah.
like, right, after all the poor guys in their like frozen houses, they're
Yeah.
like, right, we'll do our best.
Pretty much.
And then they're like, we're decimated, and the Empire's like, right, no problem, it's much smaller now.
And to be fair, they do a bang up job at it. Like the
Well,
the
are
casualty
they on friendly
ratio-
terms in that regard? Are they like, thanks, Kislev? Or they're like, you primitives.
They are allies. Sometimes
Okay.
the Empire sends them equipment. The Kislevites, they think the Empire's a bit soft, given that they're the ones sitting on the
They
border.
got central heating.
Yeah. It doesn't snow sometimes of the year, so they're clearly weaklings.
Yeah.
But they're friendly with the Empire. There's a little bit less lore on their relationship with other factions, but
Okay.
they seem friendly enough with the Dwarfs whenever Dwarfs make an appearance in Kislev. Gotrek and Felix once again have several books in Kislev because there's a lot of stuff to kill when Chaos is rampaging around. And overall, that's pretty much Kislev. It's Polish, Russian, that area of the world, Slavic cultural soup. It's cold, and every now and then Chaos likes to invade and either get pushed back if it's just a few raiders or get severely weakened if it's a proper army.
Okay.
Moving down, finally, to the Empire of Man,
Ooh.
the protagonist faction, much like the Imperium is, although GW did rein in the author favoritism a bit for the Empire.
Oh.
It's not quite the same level of the Ultramarines plot armor.
Which has been waning.
It
very
has been
gradually,
winning,
but
and
still.
don't get me wrong, they're my favorite chapter, so. But as for the Empire itself, it's Germany.
Yeah.
They speak Reichsspiel. The capital
Yeah.
province is Reichland. Altdorf is
Yeah.
the capital city. It's on the
Yeah.
Reich River.
Yep.
It's,
The main guy in charge is called Karl Franz. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Germany.
There's a William Feuerbach is a character. It's the Germanest place that ever Germaned, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And this all
There's a
came-
small town called Oktoberfesten. Like, yeah, perfect.
Probably. And this came about because many thousands of years ago, a man called Sigmar was born. And this is a story that might be a little bit familiar to people who are only knowledgeable on 40k. The Empire was just a bunch of tribes, and Sigmar himself came from the tribe of the Unberogans. And he had a vision of uniting this empire. And he did. He got almost all of the human tribes that were available, like that existed in this area, to come together and form the Empire of Man. He ruled it for 50 years, and then on the
50,
50th...
that's it.
Well,
50.
you'll see, on the 50th year of his reign, he took his hammer, Gal Maraz, that a dwarf king had given to him for saving his life against orcs, and then just left. He just
Then
walked
left.
off.
Thanks.
He, to
Selfish.
be fair, he did ascend to godhood, so he was still
He
around.
abandoned so many people. They're like, you're the god of abandonment.
He watched over the empire.
Okay.
It was a bit rough because each trapped him in a magical vortex, which again I'll get to. But he did his best. He ruled very well. It was a time of prosperity. And then after he left, he became a god. People started worshiping him as a god when one crazy man said he was a god, except he could kind of prove it because he had miracles to back it up. And ever since then, the empire has been progressing technologically, culturally, to get to the point where, unlike pretty much almost every other fantasy setting, it's actually in the Renaissance era. It's not vaguely medieval-ish. The empire is pretty firmly in the Renaissance. And there's hints in the lore that before it was end times, it was reaching the Industrial Revolution. Like there's all
Right.
sorts of like tax riots, like the window tax riots. Andy, I know I brought that up for the.
Well, they have gunpowder, so I was thinking they're
They
a bit
do.
further ahead than a lot of the other factions if they've got gunpowder.
They
It's pretty
do.
good.
They're probably the second most technologically advanced. So that's the Empire.
Can I make a guess? Is the most technologically advanced the dwarves by
It
any
would
chance?
be the dwarves. They're close
Ah,
neighbors.
ugh,
One last thing about the Empire, really quick. They have you ever played Rome Total War, Andy?
briefly.
Okay. They're kind of like the Romans in that game, and that they're not the best at anything, but they're damn good at everything. Like the
Like the
Empire.
Ultramarines.
Indeed. Like the Empire, they're not nearly as good as magic as the Elves, but
Mhm.
they're certainly better than pretty much everyone else because they have access to all winds of magic, all 8 of them, and can freely create more. They have colleges of magic. They're definitely not as good as tech at the dwarves, but they're not as slow to adapt as the dwarves are. They can invent new things much quicker.
They're better at taxation.
Yes, the Empire is also quite good at taxing you. But because that was the perfect segue you gave me, Andy, how about we talk about their friends, the dwarves?
Okay,
Now,
cool. I like dwarves.
you see the,
Cool.
the mountain chain next to the Empire?
Yeah,
It's the grayer bits on the map.
yeah.
That's where dwarfs live.
A kind of spinal column that's going down
Yeah,
the whole thing. Yeah.
that's
Okay.
the World's Edge mountain range, and in there is dwarves. That's where their kingdom was in ancient times, and what's left of it is still there, as
Okay.
well as goblins and Skaven. But for now,
So that's where Skaven come from.
they don't come
Kinda.
from there. They're just everywhere.
They're just. Well, I was going to say I would have just thought they'd be under the floorboards of every kingdom, so that might not be far off.
Pretty much. There's one place in the planet Skaven aren't, and I know I've said this 3 times. I'm going to get to it. I keep having to say that about Ulthuan, the elves. But for now, for the dwarves, they're like the Roman Empire equivalent, funny enough, for the Warhammer Fantasy world, because they had a massive empire stretching pretty much every mountain range in the world, or at least the old world. So this whole mountain range, the big spine, the ones going into the empire in Bretonnia, Dwarven Kingdom, it was all connected by this massive underground highway called the Underway. And even back then, they weren't quite as technologically advanced as they were now. They were still probably equal to the Empire thousands and thousands of years ago.
Okay.
They are good with their stuff. Problem was, they had a war with the elves, the high elves, because the dark elves did some trickery
Ooh.
and caused a nice little false flag operation, and things spiraled out of control because the dwarves are very stubborn. They love grudges more than anything else. And the high
Glad
elf,
they even have a book about them.
they do, a great book. And the high elf Phoenix King at the time was, even the high elves think he's an incompetent moron. Their arrogance ends at him because they look back on that era of history and go, God, what an idiot. So between that, massive war weakened both of them and led to the fall of their massive empires. As for the dwarves specifically, it gets worse for them. Because remember the old ones? They had servants called Slan, which every now and then they show up in 40k, but they're a lot more prevalent in fantasy.
Okay.
They're the strongest magic users in the world, and their second and first generations could just move the planet like the tectonic plates around.
Oh, why not? Yeah.
And one of them, of the second generation named Mazdamundi, decided these mountains need to be a bit further to the left. And so he moved the mountains a bit further to the left. Except the problem with that is that's where the dwarfs had all their buildings. So overnight, pretty much, they went from weakened but still hanging on to all of our empires exploding, and we don't know why.
Oh,
The
poor
Skaven,
dwarves.
the Skaven also had a hand in that. They
Of course
built,
they did.
They built something big, and it went wrong because everything they do goes wrong, but it's the Skaven.
I like
so
how
it's
vague
funny.
that was. They built something and it broke.
Pretty much. I believe it was they were trying to expand their own little underground realm. And
Okay.
to be fair, it expanded the underground. It just probably blew up and killed every Skaven nearby.
Which tunnel collapsed, yeah.
Which, again, for the Skaven is a non-issue. There are always more rats.
Yep.
As for the dwarves, though, they got invaded by rats. They got invaded by goblins and orcs. Pretty much all of their major holdings on the planet gone. They have their capital. They have a few select wealthy holds, including one that's right between the Badlands and Tilea, if you can see where that is on the map. Which
I
has,
can see that.
I believe, the largest navy in the Warhammer world. But they don't use it because the dwarves hate the ocean. They just have it.
I'm not getting my shoes wet. Some dwarf commander.
It's pretty much that. We'll go into that really quickly and a little brief foray into dwarf culture. Like you said earlier, they have that great book of grudges. They love complaining about things and writing down people that wronged them. To the point where there was an Empire business transaction that the dwarves were shorted 2 coins. Probably not even intentionally. It probably just fell out of the wagon or whatever. It's like, oh, well, 2 coins, who cares? The dwarves killed everyone involved.
Oh my. And I'm assuming that's why no one came to their aid with the orcs and the goblins and everything. They would just say, oh, the orcs are under attack. I'll go them, I don't care.
The elves certainly weren't going to help because the elves and dwarves just got done having World War I. Mankind probably wasn't at the best state at the time to help them out, because this was before the Empire was even a thing. So, but yeah, even if it was a thing, with that kind of thing going on, they probably would have been that charitably inclined. That being said, they are still best friends with the Empire, humans, the Empire specifically, because, like I said, Sigmar saved that Dwarf King to get his hammer. The Dwarf King pledged that dwarves and the men of Sigmar would be friends forever. Doesn't stop there from being war. This is still a Warhammer setting. But it's like, you know, there's half the war against men and dwarves as there is against dwarves and everyone else. Yeah.
Just like the fun drunk uncle that comes to the wedding.
Exactly.
You're like, oh, he's fine when he's not drunk. He's like, I'm gonna fight you, yeah. So he's fine when you get to know him, but like he's been through a lot. Someone went in his house and they ruined his living room, and he's angry about it still.
Exactly. Yeah. Pretty much.
And he's got an infestation problem under the floorboard, so he's very grumpy.
Yeah. But they did, to be fair, they did give mankind gunpowder technology, teach them how to work steel and all that good stuff.
That's good of them.
They even have a little rivalry over who invented the rifled barrel. Some humans claim it was the Empire in Hawkland. The dwarves claim it's the dwarves who did it.
Not even just a specific region, just no, we.
The dwarves.
It was us.
The dwarves.
It was us, TM. Dwarves FC did it.
Yeah, pretty much. And but aside from those things, they're pretty standard fantasy dwarves. They like their booze. It's called Bugman's Ale. It's the finest ale in all of the fantasy world. And if you go to, I think, the Games Workshop headquarters in Nottingham, they have a cafe where you can buy Bugman's, which
nice.
I desperately want to do.
Oh, I'll go over. I'll do like a field trip. I'll get some. I'll bottle it and I'll send it to you through the post. I got you some and it'll just be like soaked through the parcel. I'm like, I tried.
I'd be forever indebted. Or if it comes ruined, you're forever in the grudge book.
Yeah, I'm gonna be in the grudge book. I bet.
The last 2 things to take note with the dwarves is, aside from their grudges, is they're very, very conservative, and I don't mean that in right-wing politics. I mean that in, like, if something hasn't been in the blueprint stage for 500 years before a prototype is built, it's considered radical and unsafe technology.
To be honest, that's quite typical of a dwarf species in any fantasy setting. Like, they keep to themselves, they stick by the rules, and they're not very big fans of change. You know?
They will, over time, it will happen, but even their language doesn't drift. It's to the point where if you speak ancient Khazalid, their language is called, you have a decent shot of understanding what it is 5,000 years later.
I like that.
And
dwarves are great in any setting. They're always great.
I'm never unhappy when it's a dwarf involved. They're just great.
Yeah, elves can be a bit hit and miss, but dwarves, you're like, you know where you are with a dwarf. You
Yeah,
know
even my
exactly where you
elf
are.
fan, I know they can be sometimes they're not great. But dwarfs, you
Mm.
know what you're in for. Always a good time. The last thing is, just because it's cool, the Slayer cult. A dwarf who does something real bad has to shave his head, except for a mohawk, dye it red, and then find death in battle to redeem himself.
Oh, that reminds me of what's it called in Dragon Age? The dwarves who wear black armor and they're like, there's like they go underground in the deep roads, and the equivalent of like demons flock, and they're like the first wall of defense, and they have to join this legion, and they all wear black armor, and they're like, oh, you're a criminal. You can die, or you can go and fight the dark spawn in the deep tunnels. And I feel like they're called the Legion of the Damned, but if that's the case, then there's a copyright infringement problem there.
Someone copied someone's homework.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that now, but still.
Huh. But yeah, it's that kind of thing, and because again they're dwarfs and they're so obsessed with grudges and just their mentality is, it's been noted even like in Godric and Felix books, that Felix like they're almost alien. They're not just short people. Their mindset is vastly different from humans.
Oh, they're called Legion of the Dead. It's almost damned. It's the Legion
Not
of the
quite
Dead.
though.
Not quite.
But like something wrong for the dwarfs can be like you accidentally caused an entire dwarf city to be destroyed. You are taking that Slayer oath right now.
Oh, I thought it was going to be something really minor, like that Star Trek episode. It was like, oh, you trampled someone's flower grove. Death penalty. Like, what? I was like,
Well,
that's quite
that's
harsh.
the other end of the spectrum. Like, let's say
Oh,
you're gambling. The dwarves do like gambling, and it's not just if you lose, you automatically take the oath. But let's
okay.
say like you lose a month's worth of earning. That dwarf may decide that's worthy of taking the oath. He has to die in battle now.
Right.
Like a trip to Las Vegas would either end with a dwarf obscenely wealthy or leaving with a death wish. And what one last thing in the dwarfs before I move on, because I just laugh at this. There was a dwarf again, Gotrek and Felix. I'm gonna reference them a lot, by the way.
Okay. That's fine. I
They're
don't
just
mind.
they're the book version of this. Like if you want to get into Warhammer Fantasy, read those books. But aside from that, there was a dwarf, like Gotrek and another dwarf, an old friend of him, were arguing about something, and it was an intense argument. And Felix was the only human around, and he looked at a bunch of the other dwarfs and was like, "Is this not the stupidest thing you've ever heard? Like, someone back me up on this." And then one of the dwarfs goes, "I haven't talked to my brother in 50 years because he didn't pay for a tab he said he would cover." It's like
Nice.
that grudge, beard, slayer oath, technology grudge. There's the dwarves.
Yeah, fueled by grudges. A
Yep,
great species.
indeed. Now, to move a bit south, you know what? No, I'm getting them out of the way. I'm going to be angry. To move west,
Oh, we got to do it. I know where you're
Britannia.
going as well. Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of them, as I'm sure some of you watching are aware of. They, to give them their credit, I can't even give them credit. When
Can't even say
When
the
Sigmar was
words.
uniting the tribes, the Bretonnians were the one tribe who said, "No man who has united pretty much all the rest of mankind we know of, and has defeated chaos and orcs and all sorts of other things. We're too good to join your fun club. We're gonna stick over here and sleep with our horses."
Ooh.
As for beyond that, and so that's why they're their own independent nation. They're also a faction of LARPers. There's another great thing for you. Because one, their government is feudal. They're like more proper fantasy. They're like feudal medieval knights, chivalry, all that stuff. Their government keeps it that way. Doesn't allow technological advancement because they need to keep the peasants locked down and poor and dirty. And so they're like, nope, it's medieval stasis. We are not letting you advance up the tech tree.
Oh no.
The other way they're LARPers, they LARP as medieval knights. The other way they're high elf LARPers, which, don't get me wrong, I appreciate, taking some
Speaking
inspiration
as an
from
elf
elves.
enjoyer yourself.
Indeed, I can look past that a bit. Indeed, and the knights they have are based off of high elf silver helm cavalry units. They're called.
Budget ones then, I
They
guess.
they saw way back when uh, elves and chaos were fighting. They saw these elves charge the battle on their horses and their armor, and they were like, "That's cool as
That's cool.
hell." And to be fair,
Yeah.
that is cool. Maybe you need to take the copying it so far that you base your entire economy pretty much around horses. Yeah, they love horses to the point where once you can walk, you're then taught to ride a horse. Even their peasants have horses. It's
They're
like
kind of French.
they're very French. Like the founder, like their version of Sigmar is named Giles Le Breton, I believe.
Oh, very French then.
Yeah,
Okay.
quite. He's the only Bretonnian I think is cool because he comes back as it's just the Green Knight. Again, when I said they were Arthurian legends too, he's just straight up called the Green Knight. He's a green ghost knight that shows up and murders people and then goes somewhere else to do the same.
Then he goes for a nap, and then he comes back.
He's the only
Okay.
cool Bretonnian, and that's partially
Right.
helped because he's dead. And the only good Bretonnian is a dead Bretonnian.
That was great. Just the conviction you said that was amazing. Oh, I'm gonna clip that somewhere.
My rage is strong and unending towards these people. Aside from that, the last way they're LARPers is their god, the Lady of the Lake. It's just the elven god Lilith. Yep.
Yeah, I remember your video about Bretonnia, and I was like, oh, so she was just she's this very good at just covering her ears
She's
with a cloth.
pretty much manipulating them to her own ends. The Wood Elves are also manipulating them to their own ends. Sometimes
So would it be fair to
Bretonnians-
say that they're an army of simps?
Pretty much, yeah, for the Lady of the Lake bathwater. And that's not even a
Maybe
joke.
if I fight enough for her, she'll go out with me.
Yeah, because the highest Bretonnian nobles are called Grail Knights, and they get that by drinking from the Grail that, the prophet of the Lady of the Lake gives them. I don't remember her name because I don't like remembering Bretonnian lore, so I think I've just ejected her from my system. She has an official title. Not important. It's Bretonnian. It's never important.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. So, and then they basically become superheroes, superpowered knights.
You drink the bath water of the Lady of the Lake to
Yep.
get stronger.
It doesn't stop them from having their head torn off by an imperial cannonball, though. So, way to go. You can lift twice as much as anyone. I have a gun.
Yeah. Full horse, bro. Cannon go boom.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Empire, basically.
Yep. And relations between the Empire and Bretonnia, they waver between at one point the Bretonnia is trying to conquer the Empire. Sometimes they're friends because they're the only humans in the area that are relevant. There are other humans, but that's more of Games Workshop going. These places don't get an army. So, that's Bretonnia. I'd like to move on.
Please do.
I'm not going to move too far from the world, because if you see where the A in Bretonnia is, it ends.
Yeah.
That's Athel Loren, which is where the Wood Elves lived. So when the High
Very
Elf,
small.
Indeed. But it's bigger on the inside, shall we say.
It's the TARDIS of Warhammer Fantasy.
Not far off in some ways, because it's always been a magical force, and before Chaos invaded the world, it had roots across the entire planet.
Okay.
And in some places, it does still branch up, which means you could be sailing in the ocean, you take a rest stop on an island, and then there's angry elves shooting arrows at you while the trees come to life and butcher you. So they're around, but they're mostly in Athel Loren, the Wood Elves.
Okay.
And when Chaos invaded, Athel Loren stuck out of it for a bit, but the High Elf Queen at the time went there, took her kids to keep them safe from Chaos, and her kids go back to Ulthuan, where the rest of the High Elves are, but that's their first little interaction with the Elves. After this is all done and said, the Elves colonize pretty much most of the world. The Dwarves may have had the mountains, but the Empire, Bretonnia, all the Old World, all across Araby, the Badlands, even some of the places like that lost Isle of Tor Elithis. That's an elven colony. They went everywhere.
So you're saying it's like a parallel with Warhammer 40k, where at first the elves owned pretty much everything, then they dwindled, then humanity kind of took up from what was left behind? Or...
Not too far off. That it is kind of that is a bit of a parallel. Although the elves, what did them in wasn't this big. They didn't.
Wasn't a lust demon.
They did not literally screw themselves over. Although Slash does still like elf souls in this universe. It was the elves and dwarfs because of that idiot Phoenix King They got in a big punch-up. And
the biggest punch-up.
The elven colonists were recalled to Ulthuan after the war was over. But they didn't go home instead, because what they did was they went to Athel Loren to keep themselves from the dwarfs and the chaos demons and the orcs and all of the problems this world has.
Okay.
And they made a deal. The forest said, you can live in here, because the forest is alive. It's a magical fantasy forest. Of course it's alive. You can live in here, and in exchange, when it's the winter months, and just in general, but especially the winter months when the forest goes dormant, you got to keep us safe.
Need to feed the squirrels because they're going to go hungry.
Pretty much. And that's
go and find some almonds.
The Wood Elves and Athel Loren for the thousands and thousands of years they've existed. They have not changed pretty much in the slightest.
Okay.
They make the dwarfs look friendly and outgoing with their isolationism. They do not want to leave their forest unless they absolutely have to. And to be fair, they rarely have to. Because, again, magical forest, they're elves, they live long as hell anyway. Why leave? As for Athel Loren itself, every year, a wood elf goes into the Oak of Ages, which is the big tree at the center of it.
Okay.
And he goes in, and he becomes the demigod of the hunt, Orion. And which is an incarnation of the elven god Kurnos. And then he leaves, and then he declares it's time for the wild hunt, and what that means is sometimes they hunt, pretty self-explanatory. They go out and hunt beastmen, or what they like to do is they go out and just ransack a couple Bretonnian towns. It is
There's a Witcher free crossover joke there somewhere.
Probably.
sometimes they go out and they try to hound a lady called Ciri. She's got special powers or something. And I believe they are elves in the Wild Hunt, so yeah, indeed. Another parallel.
Indeed. But the Wood Elves are definitely a lot more fey than, like, elven. Like, the High Elves, they're High Elves, just taking the extreme, same with the Dark Elves. The Wood Elves are just insane, like, old mythic fey tales, where one will come out, take your children, and then burn your house down because it's funny to them.
Oh, nice, charming.
They're insane. And the forest doesn't help this because the forest has the dryads, the Ents. They're called like tree guard, but they're Ents.
Okay.
And unlike Lord of the Rings, where they're slow to anger, but slower to forgive, they're just always angry, all the time.
Angry trees. Angry trees gonna get you.
And just to really hammer it home, let's say you're a random peasant. You walk into Athel Loren. They might treat you to the most glorious feast you've ever had. And then you leave, and 500 years have passed. And also, all of those years catch up to you the moment you leave the forest boundaries. So you rapidly age and die.
Oh, no.
Other times... Oh, also, this took like 5 minutes inside of it, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Other times it's the reverse. You're in there for like 80 years. You leave an old man. You walk outside. Your mom's like, "Little Timmy, it's time for dinner." And she's like, "What?" Because little Timmy is now old Timothy.
He is Sir Timothy of Lothlorien, and he has a big, mighty beard.
Yeah, indeed. And it's just magical shenanigans in that forest. Usually they're malicious. For anyone going in there with ill intent, or not an ill intent. The forest doesn't like intruders in this place. So that's Athel Loren and the Wood Elves. Crazy tree people, crazy tree huggers. Don't piss them off. Because
lots of almond milk.
Indeed. Despite the fact that they're hippies, they're good at magic, good at archery, and have no problem eating you.
And they don't pay taxes.
Indeed.
Right.
There are no taxes in Athel Loren. There's just killing random people and giving their blood to the earth.
Ooh, nasty.
Indeed. To move on, Estalia. It's Spain.
Estalia. Couldn't have guessed.
It's another one of those places, like, it's background lore. At one point, Araby conquered it. Bretonnia waged a crusade to take it back, beat up Araby. That's pretty much it. There's not much there.
Okay, just Spaniards in fantasy. Cool, done.
to go to the right and down a bit, Tilea. It's Renaissance Italy.
Hey, Italia!
It's the same things, pretty much. They did have
Patrick
this,
and Felix went there and they ordered a pizza. Hooray!
pretty much. They have met in Tilea. I don't know how you say it.
Leia?
Tilea.
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 Leia.
It's
Olé. That's Spanish. Balls.
not not too much there. There's a little bit more lore, but that's pretty much what it is. There's also, in even smaller text, you can't see the border kingdoms right next to Tilea. To the right. That's basically Games Workshop went, you want to make your own little homebrew faction of humans? Build them there.
Right.
It's like there's just thousands of princedoms of varying size. It exists. Like the intent of it.
It looks a bit too small to have thousands of them there, but
It's some of them. They're like the Holy Roman Empire, where like a fiefdom is like a castle and the land around it, and that's technically
it's like
its
a
own
castle with
independent
12
state.
people in it.
Yeah.
It's like, we're a state. Okay.
Some of them are a bit bigger. And one other thing to take note of, I should have mentioned this earlier, is that the Warhammer world, fantasy world, is about twice as big as Earth.
Oh.
So,
Okay.
like, the Empire, super Germany in terms of size.
Mega Germany.
It's very big. So that's why there could be thousands. It's the Homer area.
Yeah.
There is
Norsca. You can't grow anything. Imagine if you could grow even less. Thanks.
you have twice the land to grow nothing in.
You have twice the barren land. Yeah. Enjoy. And it's going to take twice as long to get to anywhere with some actual resources.
Yep.
Thanks.
But that does mean twice as many imperial citizens to murder. And give to Khorne.
Guess so.
There was a mercenary faction called the Dogs of War that were basically like every race had their own little mercenary. Even orcs, there were orc mercenaries you could wield together in this mishmash army, which is a really cool idea. But that's an old army. I don't think they're quite as old as Kislev was, but not far behind. So they haven't gotten much love.
I'm just imagining them being led by an eye-patched leader and his lieutenant going, "Why are we here? Just to suffer. I can't feel my leg." It's like, they're like diamond dogs. Oh, dogs of war. Oh, fun. Metal Gear Solid reference. Anyway, don't mind me.
Oh, not at all. That's, yeah, so I know a bit brief, but it's pretty much what it is. Tilea, Renaissance era Italian city-states, Estalia, Spain, border princes, have at it, homebrew lore writers. As for going between Estalia and Tilea, though, there's a very, very important settlement there. It used to be called Kavzar. It was a human and dwarf settlement, allied. They lived together in harmony, which is probably the only time that ever happened in the Warhammer world.
Okay.
And then they wanted to build their own Tower of Babel. They wanted to build a tower as high as they could. This, to be fair, wasn't to reach the gods. It was to honor the gods. They still built it too tall. They hit the Minecraft build height. They couldn't build it any taller.
Oh, dear.
One day, a stranger approached them and said, "Hey, I can finish your tower. Just let me put an offering to my gods on top of it." And they said, "Well, why not?" Now, this is the tale. There's a couple ways this could have gone down. The stranger might have just been evil. The dwarves and the humans might have shorted him payment in some other way. Either way, once the tower is completed, the grand opening ceremony is done. The bell rings 13 times. And things start going bad. It starts raining warpstone, which is, imagine if chaos was a rock.
Oh.
It's
raining boulders, everyone. Oh, not again.
It's pretty much raining radioactive hell rock, like uranium, if uranium also had demon energy inside of it.
Ray.
And if you haven't guessed where this is going, you probably will be able to guess. Rats started swarming the streets and getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Oh, no. That's where Skaven come from?
Yep. At one point, this got to the point where the humans banged on the dwarf portion of the city, because the dwarves still live underground. They're still dwarves. They're like, "Let us in. Please, for the love of God." And the dwarf said, "No, go away. Quit being babies."
Dwarf said, "You didn't pay me for when I let you borrow my milk for your cup of tea, and you didn't give it back." And it's like, oh, no, here we go.
and that person's grudge was never forgotten.
Nope.
They came back a second night, though. Like, "Hey, can we come in now?" And the dwarves were like, "Yeah, we don't." The answer's still no. Also, we don't have anything to feed you with. Rats ate all of our food.
Oh,
And then they tried again the third night. They didn't ask this time. They just bashed the door down. And then they opened the door, and then there were a lot of very big. There were a lot of dwarf skeletons, and a lot of very big man-sized rats.
so it's like Moria plus rats.
Indeed.
Cool.
And then the city gained a new name, Skavenblight,
Oh no.
the capital of the Skaven Empire.
It's right in the like. This is the thing. All these useless places are really far away from where chaos is. Like, if they were higher up, okay, that'll be fine. They'll take care of the rat problem. They'll take care of the French people. They'll take care of these annoying people. It's like, no, right in the middle.
Nope.
Nurtured between the borders of people actually fighting chaos.
Nope.
Typical.
And it's kind of hard to tell, but there's also mountain rage right above Skavenblight, geographically speaking.
Okay.
So they can't just march down and attack it. And even ignoring that, it's also surrounded by the worst swamp ever. So you try and invade, you're drowning in the swamp, to say nothing of the rats that would very much prefer you didn't do that. As for the Skaven themselves, because aside from this, they're everywhere, pretty much. There's many words to describe them. Cowardly, verminous, numerous. The best word is asshole.
Okay.
Because aside from being evil, they won't do anything if it doesn't make them just the biggest prick on the planet. Like, they hate everyone. This includes other Skaven. They just hate other people slightly more than Skaven. I can't emphasize that slightly enough, because the favorite thing for a Skaven to do is just stab someone in their superior in the back and take his place. Meanwhile, everyone below him is doing that to him. It's a conga line of betrayal. That being said, the reason they haven't wiped themselves out is because, again, they breed like rats, funnily enough. There will never be more Skaven. Or there will always be more Skaven, pardon me.
Yeah.
They outnumber everyone in the old world by a factor of 10. They're under pretty much every city. They were building a nuke under the capital of the empire at one point.
Like the escalation. They're really annoying. They hold grudges. They built a new... Sorry, what?
I'm not kidding. They have nuclear weapons.
Oh, okay. Why not?
As for what... Powered by that warpstone, by the way, just because it wasn't evil enough. It had to be powered by Hell Rock.
Right.
They believe it is worth more than gold. In fact, they don't think gold is worth anything, but they still mine it. Can you guess why?
Why?
The entire reason, and this is, I'm just going to read it, I think, word for word from the Warhammer Total War flavor text for the gold mine. It's, although the Skaven themselves have no use for gold, they mine it purely to inconvenience the other races.
Oh, I thought you were going to say they're going to lay traps with it. It's like, no, we just want to take it away so you can't have it. We'll put it in a big vault and we don't do anything to it. Like,
it's just that.
What arseholes.
They just take it, just so no one else can have it.
Yeah. Like, it's like, I'm going to take your dialysis machines. I don't need it. We've got loads of them. Yeah. Enough to be you.
And they tunnel underground. They have, it's called the Under Empire. It's even deeper than the dwarves or the goblins. If you dig deep, you're not going to find treasure. You're going to find rats. And these rats don't like you because they have halo energy weapons.
Oh no!
They're called rattling guns.
I've heard about them. Yeah, which is a great pun. I like that.
It's beautiful. The only reason they don't take over the world, because they have the numbers and the technology, is because the backstabbing thing for one. That's the reason they fight each other more often than anyone else. And even when they're on the cusp of victory, they will betray each other. So the guy
they can't unify long enough to not kill each other.
Yeah, the only real time they've ever unified truly was when Nagash rose, the great necromancer, and that was only because Skaven corpses work just as well for other corpses for necromancer purposes. So they were like, we can't keep killing each other because otherwise he's gonna show up and wave his hand, and then we're gonna have to deal with that. Aside from that, they've never been truly unified.
I just like the idea of like a Skaven being born, And he's like a brand new baby, and his rat mother is like, "What a cute little Skaven!" And he's just got a knife ready, and he's goes stab. It's like, "Thanks, mum," and off he goes. It's like, what a little git! It's like no loyalty at all.
Nope, they will kill each other in the womb if they can.
Oh dear me.
Also, I'm not going to talk about it. Feel free to look up how Skaven women are treated and Skaven are born. I'm not getting into that.
Yeah, don't want to go down that rabbit
It's
hole.
about on the same level as the Daemonculaba.
Or Skaven hole, I should say. Yeah, we'll keep that away.
Yeah. To run through just a few quick ones real quick. You see where it says the Badlands?
Yep.
Orcs.
Orcs.
And they're pretty much 40k orcs. Spelled with the C, not a K. And they're slightly less technologically advanced relative to the setting. Aside from that, red still makes you go faster. Gork and Mork still want the wah. Anything in front of them is probably not going to be around for much longer, especially the main
Biggest
special
orcs
character.
are the best, orcs.
Yep.
Like, I'm the best orc because I'm the biggest one. Yeah, pretty standard orcs.
There's Grimgur Ironhide, who anything he's fighting it dies. I've got no other way to put it. He was killed by Archaon in the end times because Archaon had to pull out all the stops, and also Games Workshop wanted the setting to end.
Like, right, we've got to do it.
But he did kind of get even with that, because in the Storm of Chaos before the End Times event, Grimgor headbutted Archaon in the balls and snuck up on him and pulled a victory out that way.
Wow.
So,
Victory by bull headbutt.
yeah.
Nice.
But that's the Badlands. There's a couple like necromancers around there. There's a very, very small amount of dwarf colonies, especially near or not really colonies, what's left of their empire in the mountains. Mostly it's just orcs and goblins.
Right.
The Darklands, Chaos Dwarfs.
Oh, of course.
They have their own little empire. They don't do much. I imagine with Total War, kind of, they're going to be the first major DLC. That's going to change. I think they're going to be in the old world as well. And they have been around. Like, they're called the Black Orcs, which were supposed to be orc slaves. The problem with making a bigger, tougher orc is that you've made a bigger, tougher orc. That's also smarter. So those guys just rebelled and left.
Okay.
Aside from that, they're dwarves but evil. They're really good at technology. They can actually use magic, because dwarves, for the most part, can't use magic.
Right.
They have to make artifacts. Pardon my insulin pump beeping there.
I mean,
Surprise guest appearance.
featuring insulin pump. The only thing is, I'm just thinking, do the grudges that the dwarves have fuel the chaos powers that they have?
They don't fuel the chaos powers. There's not as much of an emphasis on grudges, I don't believe, with the chaos dwarves. They still have them. They're still dwarves, but they're evil anyway. They were going to invade you regardless for slaves. That just
I like the
gives them
idea
an
that maybe
excuse.
they get less of a grudge when they become more evil. They're like, I don't care. I'm actually more peaceable in an ironic way. Also, here's my axe. Donk.
So
it's in your forehead.
I'm still going to cut your head off, but now it's for evil reasons, not just because
Yeah.
you shorted
There's
me
no
a
emotion
silver
behind
penny.
it. It's just, I need to do it.
Yeah, it's just, listen,
Yeah.
man, I need more slaves. You're in the way. Get out.
Yeah.
Right next to the Darklands, you have the Mountains of Morn and the Ogre Kingdoms. That's where the ogres are.
Oh, of course. Why wouldn't they be in the Ogre Kingdom?
Yeah, makes sense. They are everywhere on the planet because ogres love to hire themselves off as mercenaries. But that's where the biggest concentration of ogres are. They're pretty simple to cover. The old ones created them much like other races. And they almost had no flaws. They were resistant to chaos. They weren't like the dwarves who were so set in their ways that they were pretty easy to wrong foot. They weren't kind of frail like the elves were. And they weren't like mankind, who would often just put their ambition and join chaos willingly.
Right.
The problem was they had a hell of an appetite, and before the old ones could fix that, chaos invaded and the old ones ran away.
Oh.
So and the old ones couldn't fully finish setting their environment up around them, because they would also do that for other races, give them the perfect place to live.
Okay.
And they didn't do that for the ogres. So the ogres just walked around eating everything. They ate the
They're just hungry boys.
Yeah, they ate the giants, who were another things the old ones created. The giants used to be these super advanced, literate, like cultural renaissance place. Ogres ate them.
And then all of a sudden, nom nom nom.
Yeah, and
Giants are like, "What's that? Ow, my foot, my leg, ow, ow!"
pretty
And then they were
much.
it.
It's like the giants were a lot bigger, but there were a lot more ogres.
But they were more hungry than their
Yeah,
height.
indeed. And they went to Cathay at one point. The Grand Emperor launched a meteor into the ground, and that created the
Oh,
ogre's god, the Great Maw. And then
my word!
it also cursed the ogres to never be full, so now they're always hungry. And
Oh,
that's pretty much life as an ogre. They walk around,
poor
they eat
ogres.
things, they like to fight, they mostly like to eat more than anything. They're pretty simple. I love them though. They're very fun ogres.
Just give them a buffet and they still won't be satisfied. That's quite sad.
To quickly, let's finish off the eastern bit of the map real quick. Cathay, China.
China,
It is
just
getting
China.
it is getting a lot more lore, and it's led by a dragon emperor who's worshipped as a god by his
Oh,
people.
okay, okay, yeah.
He says don't call him a
Checks out.
god. He's not a god. Does that remind you of anything, Andy?
A
Yeah.
little bit.
And I guess they don't technically call him a god, but they worship him like a god. It's pretty clear what's going on here.
Any? Do they have a big impact on the setting, or are they more just they're just there?
They were background for the longest time. They've had one of those things where it's like, if you think about it, it is a very great setting or like impact, but because it's not developed at all, you can't get a feel for that. They have
Yeah.
their own Great Wall of China called the Great Bastion that keeps those
Oh, of
Mongol
course.
chaos
Why not?
invaders out of the
Oh yeah.
Cathay. And they and supposedly like millions of chaos invaders go there instead of the old world to invade. It's just again,
Right.
if you think about it, that's huge, but it's almost never
Yeah.
developed on.
So for all we know, that they could be doing the lion's share of killing demons and chaos.
yeah,
And we don't know about
as
it.
far as we know, they're putting in so much legwork, but until recently, they've had very little lore.
Yeah, they're like the wise guys. Like they're doing a lot of stuff, but they're not getting any appreciation for it. It's like,
Pretty,
ugh,
yeah. They've
'cause they're Asian. Ugh.
they've got all sorts of things, very cool things. They have the Dragon Emperor's sons and daughters rule Cathay in his
Okay.
stead while he's working on his own master plan. There's another Emperor of Mankind parallel. He there's a lot of people. It's Cathay. It's the largest human civilization of the setting. Just again, it's until recently gotten almost no lore, and it's fantasy China. The dragons are they're Eastern dragons with the long tails, no real wings. Very cool stuff. And as it's getting expanded more upon, it's we're learning more stuff, and it's really cool lore. It's just for the basics of it, it's fantasy China. Millions and millions, if not over a billion people there. They've got a big wall. They're very
I mean,
advanced technology, but they kind of keep to themselves.
Yeah, it kind of again, it's like that parallel of like history of the world, where it's like China was so far away, and they had literature, and they had all these things before anyone else. They were so advanced, and it's just like, and then like Europe and stuff like, had no idea they existed. They were like, oh, they're just over there. It's fine. So while we were still like warring with like axes and face paints, and China's there like we've developed poetry and civilization. You're like, oh, oh,
Pretty much. They did trade
Yeah.
with the Tomb Kings, Nehekara, before they were all skeletons.
Mm-hmm.
But aside from also, the Tomb Kings might have given them vampirism in return.
I'm guessing the Tomb Kings are our Necron. For fantasy.
They're the closest to the Necrons. And
Okay.
the big Necron rework that gave them all personalities pretty much turned them into Space Tomb Kings, which is a change I think is great. But to really finish off the area, Cathay, like I said, fantasy China, Kingdom of Ind, it's India, and there's all the lore I have for you. They have
Nice.
it's called the thousand living gods of Ind. So their gods are walking around doing
Ganesh
stuff,
is one of them.
probably. There's a bit of a question over whether or not it's actually beastmen being those gods, but they seem benevolent for the most part. So even if they are chaos
Right.
corrupted beastmen, they seem to be good folk.
Okay.
They trade. That's about it. The hinterlands of Kuresh. So anyway, Nippon. I'm gonna be totally
Nippon,
honest. I
Japan.
could not for the life of me tell you what's in Kuresh.
Japan.
It's not developed. There's nothing there. There's presumably people. For learning about Warhammer Fantasy World, these three places are so unimportant, which is a shame, but they really are. Kuresh is like, it gets the gold medal of who cares. Which there's a lot of room for cool stuff they could do, given that they always
Yeah,
base
it's
it off
bigger
of,
than the Empire.
yeah, and given that they always base it off of like historical cultures for these areas, you can do a lot of cool stuff there. They haven't.
No, of course not.
As for Nippon, they taught the Skaven how to be ninjas. Clan Eshin of the Skaven.
Why would they do that? They're not really helpful.
I don't have an answer for you. I'm guessing the Skaven were a bit sneakier there, a little bit, for some reason, more polite. They taught the Skaven how to be ninjas.
Nippon, why'd you do that?
Aside from that, there's really not too much. They have a big navy. Sometimes they fight the Dark Elves navy. That's, again, kind of it. That's why I can brush through this real quick. There's not too much here.
Okay.
Let's switch way back over to the left. Middle, I should say. Africa. Araby. Arabia. It's there's a bit more lore than other places, not too much. They have a sultanate. The sultan was called the evil sorcerer Jafar. I'm not making that up. It's just Aladdin.
Wow, Disney are calling. They want their, Aladdin plagiarism
The
sorted
mouse
out.
is coming for you, GW. Aside from that, he was the one who launched that crusade into Estalia, and before Bretonnia beat them back up. And that's Gotrek and Felix helped stage a coup there once, which it says something about them that wasn't even close to the most impressive thing they've ever done.
That was just a weekend for
revolution. Yeah, that was we
woke
got
up there drunk and they were like, "What are we gonna do?" I don't know. Stage a rebellion, so we go into that place, get some breakfast for free while the chaos is going, and we can bugger off. Yeah, cool, good idea.
Gotrek didn't have a monster to kill in the next 5 minutes, so we figured, maybe this will be fun to do.
Yeah.
As for the Land of the Dead is what it's called on the map.
Right.
Nehekara would be the proper term. This is the old ones, this is where, at least I believe, is where they originally put humans. They might have put them in both, the Empire region, Bretonnia, and here. But Nehekara became a civilization while the Empire was still just tribes. Sigmar wasn't even around yet. And they were ancient Egypt. Again, at the end of the day, to quickly sum it up, they were ancient Egypt. At least the popular conception of ancient Egypt, obsessed with death, stuff like that. And then, they had different varying dynasties warring with each other, sometimes united, sometimes not. And then, a man named Setra the Imperishable came around. Him and his many titles united the region. He formed the greatest empire of man ever seen on the planet, before Karl Franz. Had to get that one in there.
Okay.
And he tried to conquer as much of the world as possible, but he couldn't because aging was the only opponent he could never defeat. He extended his lifespan by hundreds of years, but that's still not immortal. So he died, he gave his priest instructions, find a way to bring him back to life with his glorious, wonderful body. And then that was Setra's tale for now. Then Nagash came about, who someone's called the Great Necromancer. You can probably guess what he's about.
Oh, yeah.
He bankrupted Setra's old capital of Khemri, waged a war against all of the Tomb Kings at once. He did lose, but he pretty much ruined the entire country. He found Skaven. He fought Skaven. The Skaven decided they didn't want to deal with him anymore, so they made a truce. He came back to Nehekara, found out that someone had stolen his notes and created vampires from it.
Don't you hate it when that happens?
Yeah, because that's just how powerful this guy was. The vampires are an accidental result of someone finding what he has written.
Who's been looking in my journal again?
Pretty much that. He figured, well, you're all under my control now, and he invaded Nehekara again. Cast a spell that killed everyone in it but this one guy. He needed that one guy to be the focal point, so he couldn't kill him quite yet. The Skaven gave that one guy a magical sword, stabbed Nagash with it. That one guy died. Nagash can't really die. He just goes away for a while. He goes to take a nap in the break room. And then all the Tomb Kings that died rose up as skeletons or if they just died, they still had flesh, but when you don't have a nervous system or anything but magically animated bones, all of the fleshy bits kind of fall off until you are just a skeleton in the end. So,
Okay.
all the Tomb Kings at once woke up. Imagine if every single king of England and queen woke up at once and started fighting for the throne. Except the king and queen of England actually matters in this scenario. They're not just there to be decoration.
True.
My apologies to the Queen of England. I'm sure this insult cuts deep from this random person.
Yeah.
So Setcher woke back up. The first thing he did was exile his head, like, priest, because he didn't find him a golden body to inhabit yet. The next thing he did was...
Who's that specific? It's like, where's my golden
He wanted a glorious golden body.
What was this made of? Pewter. Get lost.
Yep.
Get a proper one.
He didn't have that yet. He just had his mummy body, which, to be fair, is more than any of the skeletons had, but still kind of gross. And then he knocked everyone's head together and said, you can either serve me, I don't care if you fight each other, but when I come calling, you better damn well answer, or I'm going to cut your head off and use it as ammunition in a catapult. And because Tomb Kings regenerate, the rest of your existence is catapult ammo.
Oh.
So people listen to him, and that's pretty much Nehekara. It's filled with undead Egyptians walking around. The warriors and lower down the cast have pretty much no autonomy. They mindlessly do what they did in life. And then, like the Necrons, the Tomb Kings themselves have crazy, whack rivalries and personalities. And one of the Tomb Kings really wanted to bang Felix.
Okay.
And Gotrek even said, if she wasn't thousands of years dead, you would be marrying her. You do not have a say in the matter.
How did Felix think about all this? Was he interested?
He was all over the place in that book, man. He was terrified, and then he was terrified for a different reason, and I'm sure that at some point he was crossing his legs just a bit.
I feel like I don't really know much about Felix, but I feel like him being terrified is like the default setting of what he gets up to.
It is suffering being Felix Jaeger. You do not want to be Felix Jaeger.
He reminds me of Dandelion from The Witcher. That's basically him.
Dandelion, except Felix, he's a bit better in a fight. Felix is actually really good. He's a really strong warrior, and people look up to him, and he has no idea why. It's just he's next to the living blender that is Gotrek. Anyone's going to look kind of weak next to that. Yeah. But Felix did slay a dragon at one point, so...
Oh, nice. I think Gotrek was like, I've slain 7. Like, oh, of course you have.
Probably. That was probably like the moment the book ended. He was like, nice job, man. Like, I
first slew a dragon when I was 4 years old.
You caught up to me from 50 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Now,
choked it with my rattle.
To finish off the old world before we get to the Americas and the donut. The Southlands is southern Africa. There's not too much there. There's a lot of lizardmen, so I guess I can just cover Lustria while I'm at it. There's a lot of the lizardmen. There's a lost dwarf colony or hold called Carrick Zorn that was lost contact with. It's probably destroyed in fantasy, like original lore, because the last thing they heard of, they were fighting lizardmen, and it didn't seem like they were doing too well. Right. And then thousands of years, no one's heard of them. In Total Warhammer, this one dwarf called Thor Ironbrow just finds them and leads his faction from there.
What? Wait, he takes control of the lizardmen?
No, of the that lost dwarf hold called Carrick.
Oh, okay, right. I was about to say that'd be interesting.
He just finds them. He's like, well, I guess I'm in charge now, and everyone just kind of goes along with it because he's the first.
Any objections? Yeah, punch in the face. Any more objections? No.
That's what I thought. Let's go. He's the first dwarf they've seen that wasn't their like brother or sister in 5,000 years that they took what they could get.
They're like, new blood.
And speaking of lizardmen, let's go to South America, Lustria. I can both these continents can be covered one at a time because it's not like the old world where there's so much stuff on it. Kind of blank. That's where the lizardmen are. The lizardmen are led by the Slann, and they were created by the old ones to prepare the world for what the old ones wanted it to be. They had different jobs. There's the little lizards called the skinks. They're like the tradesmen. Like if you need someone to build something or make some coins or carve carved runes and text into something, the skinks do it. There's a step up from them is the Croxagores, which are crocodiles, alligator lizardmen. They're not the brightest, although if they live long enough, because they are all technically biologically immortal,
Oh,
they
that's useful.
they get a bit more intelligent. And even if they're not intelligent, it's a big, dumb, angry crocodile. So they're used for manual labor and then smashing whatever angers a Slan's head in. There's the Saurus, who are, imagine just a humanoid dinosaur the size of a space marine, wielding a club with built-in scale armor.
I was going to say, if you were going to say wielding a bolter, I'd have been very, very upset.
They don't
but no,
have,
a club.
They don't have bolters, but they do have T-Rexes.
Oh, okay. Why not? Yeah.
So the Saurus are the military, and again, Saurus lives long enough, he can rise up to become a commander. And then there's the Slan for the main lizardmen. That's the end of the caste system. They're at the top. The rest of the lizardmen were created by the old ones to do like just menial things. Like the Saurus were supposed to genocide all of the races the old ones didn't want hanging around, which they did, except for the orcs, because you can't keep a good orc down.
Oh, I love them.
The Slan were the people who are the best wizards on the planet, like the High Elves, with a few exceptions, have nothing on the Slan. And with every generation, like first to second, they get a bit weaker. But the first could magically move the planet closer and farther from the sun at will.
Wow.
And then the second can only do things like make mountain ranges just spontaneously appear.
Well, only. You say only.
Only.
So, yeah. I mean, that's like, yeah, it's a step down.
But
still.
That's the scale we're working on with these guys. And no new Slan are being made, though. So the Lizardmen leaders are always dying out. There's no living first generation Slan left, although there is one whose spirits just kind of hang around his corpse. He likes to make suns appear over people's head, and that goes about as well as you'd expect for him.
Yeah.
And there's one second generation left, and less of the further down generations as you go. They since the old ones were kind of their guiding everything, they go through the plaques of the old ones because they live in a jungle. Paper rots away pretty quick when it's that humid. Gold does not tarnish. So they look at the old ones' golden plaques to figure out the great plan of the old ones, to figure out what are we supposed to be doing because you guys are gone and we have no idea what's going on. That's the main reason they fight other races. If they fight chaos, it's usually because like a Slan sat around meditating for 100 years. They do that, by the way, to make sure they get the answer right. And then they wake them and go, this chaos invasion here needs to not be around anymore. And then they wrangle up their T-Rexes and Stegoladons and whatever else you can think of. The Stegoladons also have orbital sun lasers powered by magic on top of them. I felt I should just bring that up really quick.
Wow. That's really cool.
It's awesome.
Why have they not conquered all of the world at that? They've got that. Like, we can do all these crazy things.
It's mostly just because they rarely act if they aren't 110% certain this is what the old ones wanted. The last second generation Slan, his name is Mazdamundi, he's a bit more proactive, but he still spends a lot of time sleeping. And aside from that, for the most part, they're willing to stay in Lustria.
Okay.
When Chaos invaded, the High Elves were the ones who solved the problem, but the Lizardmen did the bulk of the fighting. Like, if you went to Lustria during the Chaos invasion, it was billions of Lizardmen fighting billions of demons. It was the coolest thing you would have ever seen.
And the High Elves were there just going, yes, well done. Let us know how you do. That's just the High Elves.
I don't want to be over there.
Yeah. We'll see how you go.
I can't blame them, to be honest with you. I wouldn't want to step foot in the Thunderdome.
Tag us in if you need us.
And then, there's some lost Lizardmen cities. They have, compared to the Elves and Dwarfs, they haven't lost quite as much, but they're still definitely on the losing front. But to go up a bit to the good old US of A, we have Nagaroth. That's where the Dark Elves live. And to describe them, evil. The only thing worse than them are demons and the Skaven, and I guess Nagash. But this is a pretty close-knit race for the top over here.
They've got a big chunk of the map.
They formed. I think I'll just talk about Ulthuan at once to wrap up really quick. This will be the last point. The High Elves were uplifted by the Old Ones. Their gods had always been around, because apparently the Warhammer Elven gods are cyclical, and they just flee from one destroyed setting to the next. So their gods were always around, but the Old Ones uplifted the rest of the Elves themselves, taught them to be good at magic, tried to teach them to fight against chaos. And when the Elves weren't the perfect fit for the job, turns out they figured, well, I guess we'll still keep you around. We're not going to kill you. You can have your donut. The donut is called Ulthuan, by the way, and it's not actually like a continent. It's like a boat, a land boat. Like underneath it doesn't reach to the ocean floor. It just floats on magic.
Right, so it's essentially similar to the big, on in real world, there's that big island made of trash that's not like, it's like a landmass size, but it's not really. It's just a bunch of like floating trash garbage that's coalesced into a big island. That's Ulthuan, but prettier.
That's Ulthuan, but yeah, it's prettier, and you can stand on it without suffocating in garbage.
Yeah, brilliant.
And life was good for the elves. It's pretty much Atlantis crossed with the Garden of Eden.
Okay.
And then chaos invaded, and while I did say the bulk of the lizardmen were fighting the bulk of the demons, there's still a lot of demons still left to go around, so they invaded Ulthuan. And then the High Elves, because they'd been living in paradise for a while, they had armies, but they didn't need them. They started fighting the demons and losing. And then one mad lad named Anarion grabbed the Sword of Cain. I should add, which is a Cain's sword, probably self-explanatory in that one, the Elven God of War.
Yep. We know him from 40k.
Indeed. He's a bit
more... gets clapped by Ultramarines.
He's a bit more badass in fantasy. Yeah,
okay.
He's an actual war god, not GW needs someone to be powerful, have him kill Cain.
Be powerful, but like not that powerful. Like, Cain, he's trying his best.
Poor Cain. So he grabbed Cain's sword, and I should add for reference that every single deity on the planet was telling Anarion, don't grab that sword. Don't grab that sword. No. It's so obviously cursed. No. Don't do that sword.
Don't do it.
Including the chaos gods, I should add. They were like, they weren't even doing it to save their own skin. They're like, dude, I know you hate us. It's not worth it.
They were like, we know you don't like us. We're saying, please no. Please. Pretty please. Like, that's from us.
You're going to ruin everything you have going.
That's coming from us.
Yeah. Unfortunately for him, he was past the point of no return because, as far as he was concerned, Chaos just killed his wife and kids.
Just like, I'm going to pick up the sword, Lamau.
He's like, yep, nope, I'm done. And then he killed 4 greater demons at once.
Ooh.
So no one can say he's not a fighter. He got on his dragon, flew back to the top of Ulthuan, because he just I know I just summed it up. He's killed 4 greater demons. He just walked around killing demons for a good few years. As after those 4 greater demons, him and his dragon were mortally wounded. So he flew back to the top of Ulthuan, plunged the sword in the ground, left his armor there, and then him and his dragon just kind of left. Although he shows up in Age of Sigmar as a ghost, so he's you could probably guess what happened to him. As for the High Elves, they realize that, oh wow, the world's got a lot of problems. We should probably do something more than just sit on our island. So they colonized the world. Then the idiot Phoenix King pissed off the dwarves, and they both killed each other for a while. But before that, I did say that the Dark Elves had a hand in that matter. The Dark Elves come from Anarion's secondary descendants, because his kids, like I said, his first kids still lived. He didn't know that, though, which is why he went berserk.
Okay.
Before he died, he married a woman named Marathi, evil Dark Elf sorcerer lady, and had a kid named Malekith. And when Anarion left, they were trying to figure out who the Phoenix King is going to be. And Malekith was like, yeah, I think I'm pretty good for the job. I mean, my dad was the guy who just saved the world. Don't mean to brag too much.
Yeah.
But they told him, look, we respected the hell out of you. You're a great guy. Unfortunately, your skill set seems to start and end at being a murder hobo. We're going to let this guy instead. He seems to have a cool head. His mom wasn't happy with this because she wanted to rule by proxy through her kid.
She was a great high elf Karen.
Yeah. But Malekith took it with good grace. He actually led some of the expeditions to the Dwarfs to be friends with them. And he was best kings with one of the Dwarf High King. Best friends with one of the Dwarf Kings.
Right.
Like actual friends, like they loved each other. which is crazy. Elf and dwarf, let alone Warhammer elf and dwarf.
And this is the guy who was like, "Oh, yeah, I like a bit of killing." And the dwarf's like, "We like a bit of killing.
You want to go kill some orcs?" And they're like, "Yeah,
yeah,
brilliant.
brilliant.
Want to do that." He comes back to Ulthuan from his world travels, find out that a cult of Slaanesh has sprung up, and he goes to deal with it, actually deal with it, not like, oh, I'm just going to go join it. Except Marathi is the head of the cult, his mom. She eventually convinces him to join her side. They try and stage a rebellion, and to kick it off, Marathi and the rest of the elves, just the soon-to-be dark elves, start going nuts across Ulthuan, rebelling. And the Phoenix King calls Malekith, like, dude, I need your help. And Malekith says, no problem, man. All I need you to do, I want all of the nobles gathered in one spot by the Shrine of Assyrian, so we can all come together and do this. And at this point, he hadn't revealed he was a little weasel yet. So the Phoenix King was like, yeah, we can come together and work on this. And then, once he's there, Malekith tried to force the Phoenix King to drink poison. He tried to be gentle about it, like first, like, maybe you should drink this. And Belshazzar, the Phoenix King, was like, I don't want to do that, man. You're being a bit sus. You're being a little bit weird here. And then he called the Phoenix King a traitor, except his proof for that was, dude, trust me on this. So everyone assembled just looked at him like, all right, well, I guess we know who the traitor is now. So then he forced Belshazzar to drink poison and then walked into the fire of Assyrian, which isn't as stupid as you might think, because the way that works is the Phoenix King to-be walks into the fire, and if they're worthy, they're not harmed.
He does a Khaleesi.
Yeah. Malekith was not very worthy, and he became Kentucky Fried Elf.
Oh, dear.
He didn't die, but the fire stopped acting like just a cool light source and started acting like fire again.
Oh, no.
So, High Elf Civil War happens, and during this time, it's just violence all on all sides, but the Dark Elves are losing the war. And Malekith comes up with one last plan to enact the undoing of a ritual. Because aside from Anarians stabbing elves, another elven, their strongest mage, the only one who could probably fight a Slann and not explode in 2 seconds, he made this giant vortex in the middle of Ulthuan, which would drain magic out of reality. Because otherwise, it's kind of like 40k, but especially in fantasy, if there's enough magic, demons can just be a thing. They can just appear. And since the old one's gates exploded, there's a lot of magic going around. So they had to drain that out, and that's what they did. And Malekith goes, well, if I can't be king, there won't be a kingdom anymore. And he goes to undo the vortex and just let magic rain loose, and demons can come back to Ulthuan and finish the job.
Oh, dear.
He actually does succeed in doing this, but to make sure the vortex wasn't going anywhere, all the elves that had a hand in creating it locked themselves inside of it. So once they were freed, they were just like, no, you're going to get the hell out of here now. And because this is in Warhammer, older is better. These were the oldest elf mages. They just shot him a bunch with magic and told him to go to hell. And they brought the vortex back. About half of Ulthuan sank into the ocean. What are you going to do? And the Dark Elves ran to Nagaroth, and that's pretty much where they've been. Malekith has sat there for about 10,000 years trying and failing to retake Ulthuan.
I've been playing the longest game of chess ever.
Indeed, one he keeps losing, but he lives forever, so he can lose as many times as he needs
So
to.
I've got time.
So he just needs to win once.
Yeah.
That was when, in between now and the modern times, is when he started the war between elves and dwarfs. He also, some dark elves that he sent to go do that, also taught Nagash magic. So there's Malekith ruining things for everyone again.
Ugh, he can't help himself.
Yeah, everything, like 80% of the problems in the world can be traced back to him throwing a hissy fit. Aside from that, what they do in modern times is the Dark Elves have city-sized boats they go around the world and raid with. Take slaves back to Nagaroth, because doing work themselves is quite uncouth when they have all of these slaves around to do it for them, you see. As for the High Elves, they also have the biggest navy in the world, and they say their job in the setting is to basically go around and beat the hell out of chaos.
Okay.
The Eldar, as much as I love them, I have to admit, they do not get much stuff done very frequently. The High Elves are...
So all those years eating grapes in Ulthuan, just like, it's fine. We're living in peaceful times. Like, oh, demons. What now? Oh, I need to stretch first. It's like they weren't quite ready and they've gotten a bit complacent. Yeah.
The High Elves are on the other end of that spectrum, the Esser. They're too busy saving the world to have a kid. It's like there's a demon incursion in Bretonnia. For some reason, we won't let them just destroy the place. Let's go take care of it. The Empire's in trouble. Let's go save it. All right, maybe I can take a break now. Nope, the Dark Elves are invading. Time to go deal with this.
Love, I've got Dirty Dancing on DVD. Maybe. Oh no, there's another incursion. Oh, here we go. Sorry, love. Maybe next time. Can't catch a break.
Sorry. And then aside from that, they're elves. They're very arrogant. Although, I would say they've earned it in this case. They've certainly seen a lot of stuff, stuck around. They taught mankind magic. They were the ones who upgraded magic in mankind from some dude casting a few illusions to I can now make lightning storms appear. So good on the elves. They can use much better magic because Warhammer Fantasy magic is very complicated, and I will not go into it now to save time. That can be later. And that's what the elves are doing. Anything that tries to invade them, Ulthuan's also magic because they're elves, of course it is. Anything that tries to invade usually sinks. Sometimes boulders move into the path of the ship. Sometimes the land itself just loops in on itself until they get lost and starve. And then if that doesn't work, sometimes a sea monster just eats them because the sea monsters in the elves.
Because why not? Nice. Oh, they got friends in the sea. That's nice.
There was, funny enough, there's only been 2 invasions of Ulthuan. One of them was, well, aside from Malekith, just showing up every now and then. One of them was a Norscan with... he's a cool character, but he had plot armor in spades in this book. The other was a very fat goblin who brought a horde of other...
That sounds like a Roald Dahl book.
Nope.
A very fat goblin.
Yep.
He went to invade Ulthuan.
He ended up there by accident and nearly ended the world because he started screwing with elven magical systems, and then the world kept destabilizing. They saved it at the last minute, but that kingdom, Tor of Rest, it's called, got even worse.
Oh no.
And with that went I can see I definitely got into things because I started talking a lot longer than I thought I would. But that is the basics of pretty much all of the major things of Warhammer Fantasy. Like I said, there's a couple different little places that have some importance, and there's, of course, a lot more. But if you're just wondering, what are all of these places? What is the Empire? What is all this stuff? Why are elves important? I hope I did a good job of covering that.
Why is there a donut in this big part
why
of the
is there a donut?
That was very insightful. Yeah, there's a lot. Obviously, there's a lot to get into. I do like how every few minutes there was just like, Gotrek and Felix did something here. It's like, okay, fair enough. So that's probably the easiest way to get into it.
It really is, because their series, they go across pretty much all of the Warhammer world. I think they've been to Cathay, but that's mostly just like a background mention if they talked about their time being there, I believe. I think the only place they haven't been confirmed at is, I think, maybe Nagaroth. And they were still stuck on a Black Ark, one of those big slave ships the Dark Elves have. So they've seen plenty of Dark Elves. They also sank it, because of course they did.
Yeah, why not?
He figured out how to cut a boat in half with his axe.
Oh, probably swing it hard enough. You'll get there eventually.
And, did any of this information stick? Did you learn anything here today?
Yeah, I learned a lot, but there's obviously a lot that I'll have to go over again and just because that was a very dense amount of information. I'm like, okay.
I noticed. I tried to keep it a bit brief, but as I kept going,
so much. I mean, to be honest, I like to consider myself now a lore master at Nippon, Hinterlands, and Grand Cathay. So I'm like, yeah, cool. I know everything about that faction. Awesome. But I think I still need to brush up on some of the other factions, some of the smaller ones, like the Empire and.
Don't say it. Don't say it.
I won't.
I already know what's coming.
The Badlands. I was in the Badlands. Begins with a B.
Okay. Badlands are fine. Learn more about the orcs. But if you stuck around for all of this, thank you for watching and listening. Hope you also learned something about fantasy. Andy, are there any final words you'd like to give to the fine people?
All I would say is if there's anything you've heard from our discussion that you want to hear more of, whether it's the Empire, whether it's the Wood Elves, whether it's the good old ogres, whatever it is, let us know in the comments, and maybe we'll have a chat about those things. Because again, we want to expand on my knowledge, and I'm sure, Colin, you've got a lot of stuff you could talk about in any of these different factions. So yeah, as long as it's not Bretonia. Anyone who puts Bretonia in the comments, the comment will be flagged and it will be removed, and we will send you an email with lots of naughty words on it. Mainly from Colin. I won't be taking care of that.
There will be a Bretonia beginner to expert when I'm a dead corpse and you need to get someone else on.
We'll just be like, we've got a guest act. We've got someone in to be like, but we won't. Will we find anyone? Does anyone actually like Bretonia that you've met?
I think Chapter Master Valrak does.
Oh no. Okay.
I don't like that.
Oh dear. Well, maybe one day. But we'll see.
But aside from that, like I said, we've got. I'm not sure if it'll be out, but if it is out, we'll have something on a very lovely fantasy faction who they're very fun to hate. If it's not out by the time this video goes up, look forward to learning about pest control.
Indeed. But yeah, thanks very much everyone for joining us, and we'll talk to you again another time about Warhammer Fantasy.
Take care, everyone.